Yeah.
You want to do an intro or something like that?
Nah, just start talking.
Okay,
Yeah, screw it. Yeah, I mean, we can just get right into it. I mean, I think what's been interesting, just so real quick before we even get started. So you had a conversation with Joe Justice. Let's make sure we plug that because that's going to be coming out here pretty soon, right? I'm guessing in the next few days.
It's actually rendering in the background right now. So
awesome. Yeah. What was really interesting about that is that I had a guest on my channel not too long ago was asking me about the digital self-management stuff. They were asking me because it's something that Tesla obviously uses in some form in different parts of the company, and so I'm very excited to see your conversation with him and see what you guys chatted about because I'm sure you guys went into big detail with that.
It was a lot of revelations. In fact, about stuff that like actually had to do with my own little baby company, and I didn't even realize it. As we were talking, you could see the light bulb going off in my head, like, oh crap.
Sure. Yeah, I'm super thrilled to hear that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Let's start with. Did you get a chance to see the All In podcast with Elon?
I did.
Yeah.
I watched that. I was super tired last night and not feeling very motivated to do anything, so I just watched that.
Yeah,
which was fantastic because my brain was getting fed.
Yeah, what'd you think?
I just actually did a video on that this morning on a little tiny piece of it. It's about 16 minutes and 50 seconds into that thing. He starts talking about full self-driving AI, the million people they're planning on having using FSD beta by the end of the year, which was like,
yeah.
But yeah, I thought that stuff was amazing. His whole conversation at the beginning about Twitter was really revealing. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people have, whichever side of the political spectrum or blah, blah, blah you're on, it seems like people have an unfortunate lack of understanding about where he's coming from with the Twitter deal. But I mean, it was just a fascinating, it was really funny watching all the people, because, you got like Chamath and Jason, and he was talking quite a bit, but, they were like sitting there trying to get a word in edgewise, and it was like, nah, Elon's on the roll today, baby.
Yeah. I just love how comfortable he was. You can tell that he was just really, like, once you put him in a forum with people he knows and is comfortable with, like, you can really see his true self come through. Whereas I think in other settings, which I completely understand, he might have some nerves or is like very reserved and super like calculated about what he wants to say. But with this one, Matt and I were talking about this earlier. It's just off the cuff, whatever comes first, out. He's not like sitting down and like pondering the existence of the universe while he's while he's formulating an answer.
You could see that recently he did the interview with Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut at SpaceX. Also, love how conversational it was, and you could see him just thinking. And then, as a contrast, the Financial Times interview, where they kind of asked the same, not anything against them, but they asked the same old questions that everybody always asks, and you could see him getting almost a little bit frustrated.
Yeah,
like it's like, oh my gosh, I've asked and answered this so many times. So I thought the All In podcast was so much better because you could tell that they were, they were old friends, and so they didn't have to ask all the dumb questions that everybody else has already asked.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree 100% there. So the one comment about the Twitter stuff you made is that a lot of people don't really see where he's coming from with that whole acquisition. So where do you think he's coming from? I'd be curious to pick your brain on that a little bit.
I mean, I think we just take him at face value. When he says that he wants free speech at any cost, he really means that. Now, the danger of that is, and I'm a little more cynical than him, I guess, by nature. I don't know that there's a really good way of getting free speech with that. I just feel like people manipulate free speech a lot. And so but if anybody can solve it, it'll be him. But I honestly think that's where he's coming from. So when you have people, on one side of the political spectrum saying, oh, he's favoring this other side, and then the other side saying like he's favoring the other side, and he says it, he says, if somebody you don't like can say something you don't like and it doesn't get blocked, that's free speech. He's like, that's the basis of the whole thing. And I think we should take him at his word.
Do you think you'll have a positive outcome at the end of it, or are you in the camp that this is going to be more messy than he thinks he's getting himself into? How do you view that?
I'm sure it's more messy than he thinks it's going to be, but at the same time, I'm pretty convinced that anything. I mean, have you ever started any project where it went easier than you thought it was?
Never. So, if that was the case, we'd have a billion businesses,
Exactly, right? So, I mean, everything's always harder than you think it's going to be. But the real question at the end is whether he can handle it. I mean, there's a little piece of me that thinks that with this whole bot thing that he's worried about that and whether the terms of the deal are adequate or not.
Yeah.
I have no way of knowing from the outside. He said you should take a random sampling of 100 of your followers. And I'm like, well, that's great, but what in the world would I don't even know how I would like figure out if they're bots or not.
Right.
But
yeah, the way I think about it is, and I made a video about this, I think yesterday. Was it yesterday? Like the days
you
blend
used my
so
son's
much.
music in it.
That's right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, dude, his stuff is good. So let me ask you that. Yeah, your intro song, is that his music as well? Oh, where'd you go?
Oh, jeez. Oh, man. Hold on.
No problem.
Oh, man. I just like totally lost.
We lost you.
Yeah, that is so weird.
So I can hear you, but your camera's
Yeah, just a sec. Hold on. It just like...
Oh, my God.
Oh, that is cool.
Dude. Can we keep it like that?
You should totally keep it like that. Let me try to go back.
I'm not editing this out. This is dope.
There we go. Okay, I think it's back to being fixed again.
That's so funny.
That was intense. I don't know what that was.
You were like in Bizarro World there for a hot second.
That was really weird.
Yeah.
I think for some reason the whole thing just glitched. Of course, as soon as I started, sorry to back up just a second. Sorry about that. But my son, he's a musician and he's a recording engineer and actually just finishing. He's all been self-taught, but he's finally taken a class that was a course of study, I guess. It was like 6 months long, and so he's graduating on Friday, which is really cool.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I mean, he like I do an awful lot of sound work. I'm a recording engineer, sound designer, and stuff like that. But I mean, he's using like mixing boards and old analog decks and stuff that I'm like, whoa, it looks even scary to me. So I'm like, go him. Yeah,
that's awesome. Congrats to him. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, amazing.
I really like his stuff. I really do like his stuff. The one, the song I featured of his was "A Free for Profit," I think was the name of it. Right. Yeah, and it was awesome.
I think that's just. I don't know if that's anyway. I think it's just free for profit in terms of that, but whatever. Anyway, yeah.
It's not the name of the song.
I think the song is something else, but he was saying you're allowed to use it for profit. So, but maybe that's the name of the song. I don't know. He releases a lot of songs, so
okay.
It's possible that it's all free for profit. I don't know.
I was gonna ask, the intro song of your videos, is that something he made or is that something you made?
Yeah. So I used to, when I started this channel, it had. That's Bach's Brandenburg Concerto number 3, the opening movement, I believe. And so I used to have the actual recording of that, but then I was like, hey, could you give me like a, trap sort of beat of that or something like that? And so he whipped that up in like 15 minutes. So it was very, very cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, the video where we feature his song, the AI safety angle. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that too, because obviously you have experience in AI, and it's you're obviously very embedded in the Tesla world and the Elon world. So my thought process is that even though in a public setting he's communicating it as a free speech sort of angle, which obviously it is as well, but I wonder if that is the non-abstract way of Elon trying to get buy-in from the public to do something like this to ensure that his teams have exposure to potentially a sort of a platform that could be one of the examples of what could go wrong if AI really takes over and really increases the division and the breakdown of discourse in this country. How am I thinking too far in advance with that? Am I not thinking about it correctly? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I actually thought that was brilliant. I thought your video was really, really thought provoking, and I appreciated watching it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
It's one of those things, like, I guess I'm reminded, and I can't remember the name of the particular chatbot, but Microsoft released it several years ago. It wasn't Cortana, but it was something like that.
GPT?
And it was a chatbot, and it just went out into the internet world, and it became like some sort of like neo-Nazi crazy thing, like after a couple of days. And then they took it offline and they fixed it and they put it back online, and the same exact thing happened to it again. So, that's the kind of, it's like super siloing. It's like these things can get trained in the wrong way. And so I think that there's a lot of Elon, I think it was in the All In thing when he said, like, I've just sort of given up. Was that it, or was I? Gosh,
I know he talked about it. He talked about it on the Joe Rogan Experience, like the first time he was on Joe Rogan.
That's what it was. Yeah, thank you. And so he said, I've just sort of like given up. I used to try to like tell people to be careful about it, and now I've sort of. But I think he hasn't really given up. I think he's trying to get there first. So I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, sorry, it was actually your video that was the first part of it that had the Joe Rogan thing. No problem. I've watched so many videos the last couple of days that my brain is like but yeah, so I think you might be right. I think it might be one of those things where what he's doing is he's trying to drive the train, right? He knows this thing is going, and he's like, well, I better get in charge and try to like get it the right direction. The future will tell us whether that's the right choice or not, but I applaud him for at least making an attempt. And you're probably right. It is probably something like under the hood that he's working on. And that may also explain why he's willing to spend $44 billion or thereabouts to purchase an already existing platform rather than just make one himself. Because I mean, you have to think for $1 billion and a bunch of smart engineers, he could create his own social media platform that would be, whiteboard, start from scratch, make it much better from the get-go. And so the big sort of meta question is, why in the world spend all this money on Twitter when you could do it yourself for so much cheaper?
Yeah.
I mean, $1 billion is probably excessive. It probably $500 million. You could do it very easily. So, but the fact is they've already got all of these people on there right now. And so it's an excellent training ground to try to figure out how to maybe navigate this whole thing, because I think you're right. I mean, social media has definitely made us all, we just get to hear what we want, whether or not we even want to.
Right.
The algorithm on YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and whatever feeds me what I want to see. It kind of knows. So
yeah, it's just almost like a reflection of the human condition, right? As humans tend to be very tribal, very almost set in their ways, that they want to hear what they like to hear, uncomfortable in situations where the way they think is being questioned or being challenged. It's almost like, oh man, this is where, like, when I think about it, like, hurts my brain, because we're almost asking in this situation for AI to behave in a way that is not human, but will somehow benefit the betterment of mankind. But like, that will force a lot of very uncomfortable moments potentially, because if you really want good discourse and true freedom of speech, that means you're going to have to create an environment where you are constantly exposed to things that you do not want to hear. That's really the only way you do that. But how would you ever be able to incentivize that if humans by default do not like pain, and they don't like to be questioned, and they don't like to be challenged? How do you do that? And maybe that's like a question, obviously it's a very difficult question to answer, but I'm like, that's the question I'm asking myself. Like, how do you do that? How do you do that?
I come at this from an education standpoint, since I've been, my entire professional career has been in education. And, there's a couple of things. The first thing is, I always tell my students, I'm like, failure is the best teacher as long as you're willing to learn. And nobody likes to fail. I mean, we really don't. You don't like to go out as a kid and get on the soccer field and suck at it while all these other kids who've been doing it for a while are good, Right. But it motivates you. It's like, oh man, I'm terrible at this game, so I better get better. And it's the same sort of thing with it being in a class or something. But it goes beyond just like learning a skill. It also goes into exactly what you're saying. You get exposed to, I don't know, like maybe if you're like really, really fundamentally religious about one religion, but then you take a religious studies class and you're exposed to different ones. And you're like, oh, this is painful. This is not what I believe. But ultimately it helps you to reinforce or, come to whatever it is that you discover, you grow that way. So that pain, that thing that we don't like, is exactly what you should be seeking out. But as you say, we're all mentally lazy, I guess. It's just nice if somebody says, yeah, you're the best, this is the right answer, don't think about it anymore, everything's cool. You're like, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's like almost like that's the reason why Jeff Bezos has a yacht. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I think about it. It's like, okay, you have this person who's been working really hard and is obviously brilliant at what he does, but the dude still bought a yacht and he still likes to party. You know what I'm saying? Like, even the hardest working people that theoretically are always focused on things like a rare exception is Elon, who's somebody who just seems to be He's just obsessed with the work, obsessed with the pain of it. I have no idea. I mean, he's talked about what was really interesting about the All In podcast. He said, he has a tendency to bite off more than he can chew. And then he ends up looking like a chipmunk, because he just has way too much, right? And what's really interesting there is I've seen that with my own two eyes many times in my career, where when you have really talented people that have a lot of bandwidth, their default tendency is to say yes to everything because they feel like if they can, they should, because they can. And then before you know it, they are over capacity, and then their overall performance comes down. And instead of going at 100% with 80% bandwidth, they're going 50% with 110% bandwidth, right? So it's like, that was a very interesting self-aware sort of thing that Elon was saying there. Right. But then the other really interesting thing he said on that podcast was that he again reaffirmed that he hates being CEO. He had to be CEO at Tesla because because really what brings him joy is to work on the technical stuff, So it's like my head there, and I'm almost changing topics here a little bit. I'm sure we'll bring it back to AI at some point, but like where my head goes with that is, so what are you waiting for? Like, what are you waiting for? Why don't you just go find a CEO? Like, or is CEO of Tesla really that unique of a job that you're not able to find somebody that could potentially step in? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, wow, there was a lot of stuff to talk about.
Sorry,
First
dude.
of all, I had to laugh when Elon said he bites off more than he can chew. My parents used to call me chipmunk when I was a kid because I always ate too much, and so I had like all this stuff in my mouth. So I just
That's still me to this day.
I started laughing because I was like, well, there was the literal thing with the metaphor.
Sure.
But the other thing at the end of his talk, he started talking about morally bad decisions about going into Tesla without it just being him and JB. And I actually just talked about this in a video I did this morning. I was like, it's the most fascinating thing to hear someone talk about a business decision as a moral decision. We usually think about, like, are you going to do nice things to other people or harm them as moral decisions? And my mind and what I'm thinking is he thinks about these businesses, and the reason why he overcommits and goes crazy is that in his mind, they're a moral imperative. He's trying to change money with PayPal, like the way banking is done. He's trying to change the world to electric vehicles with Tesla. He's trying to get to Mars, create humanity 2.0 with SpaceX, and on and Neuralink and Boring Company. So I guess it was a huge revelation. I was like, oh my gosh, in his mind, business and morality are the same thing if you do the right business. It's not like I'm making a new tchotchke for you. It's like, oh, cool. Here's a new little keychain or something. It's like, wow, which is great. Make money on that if you want to. But I think Elon thinks about business as moral, and that's a wild combination.
It really is, especially in a world, lately, with some of the political discourses that, corporations are evil. Like we're in a place where corporations do nothing but not even when left unchecked, at a certain size, they become inherently evil in some respects, and I'm not saying evil companies don't exist. They absolutely do exist. But, painting a brush that says every single company that reaches a certain size becomes evil is like, I got it. But like, you're so right. And I didn't think about that until literally you just said it, which was brilliant. Thank you for bringing that up, because it really, again, speaks to sort of the existential nature of how Elon perceives everything he does. And companies like Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, when you really think about them, the common thing they have is that every single one of them are created to address an existential thing about humanity and civilization, and something that has to get done at the core. It's almost like, it's a first principles approach to business. It's like, how do we create companies that have the largest positive impact to humanity? And he's talked about this before too, but it's like, it's a complete focus on that. But it's so interesting, and it's such a weird dichotomy. And I wonder if maybe his, I wonder if that narrative will ever change, in society, because right now we're in that, at least, I don't know if you hear this in your circles, or at least the exposure that you get to, the general discourse, especially in the United States, is, big companies bad, and that's what I'm hearing. I wonder if this is maybe now the transitional period where it's like, not all big companies bad, at least we'll change, not all big companies bad, some big companies good.
It's that lazy thinking again. Yeah. It's hard, because otherwise, I think about it like, oh man, it's kind of a strange thing, but you drive down the road and you see trees. You don't go like, ooh, cool individual tree, ooh, cool individual, because it's a shortcut in your mind. You'd go crazy if you looked at every single tree. And so in our mind, many, many large companies, all bad. And it's just so much easier to just think that. It's like a shortcut. And it costs a lot of mental energy to think about, oh yeah, but wait, not all of them are bad, or even the same kind of bad, or some are polluting, other ones just maybe are like using your data in a bad way, or not just, but so there's like different kinds of bad things they can do. And also it was kind of funny. I was like, so where is the cutoff then? Because like everybody loves small businesses. It's like, oh, so-and-so and her mom put together this Etsy business, and that's fantastic. But like, at some point, if they get big enough, they're like, "Oh, evil corporation."
Yeah. So, Employee 1001 is exactly. Like the cutoff, right?
Like up to 1,000, you're good, and then it's like you're a bad corporation.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. It's really fascinating, and I think it's I think it's just it's almost like a childish approach, and I mean this in the best way possible. Like it's a very pure approach to what makes a business, what can make a business good. Is like if the business is pure in its intentions to release products and services that are good for humanity, and they treat their employees fairly, and they treat their customers fairly, and they try their absolute best, it's a representation of what can be a really good thing for societies when you have a company like that. Absolutely fascinating. Yeah, it was such a great discussion. There was one thing. Obviously they talked about FSD beta, and I'm curious to hear your opinions on this too, where they're seeing the was this what your video was about this morning? I forget what it was about. That little
section where he talked about FSD beta specifically.
Yeah. So let's get into that if you don't mind, just for a little bit, because I'm curious to pick your brain. And obviously, if you haven't watched John's video yet, make sure you go watch it. So FSD beta, 1 million users potentially by the end of the year. How do you think about that within the context of FSD beta users now, and if there needs to be additional releases or uptake from FSD? Curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think, and I didn't talk about this so much this morning, but I think it actually ties into the reason why we haven't seen full FSD beta 10.12. Unless it's come out today, I've been very busy. It's possible it did. But as far as I know, it still isn't out. And
I don't think so.
I looked back in the news, and I think somewhere around early March, it was like it's
I think I lost you again, John.
Oh man.
Dude, you were like repeating like 10 times over. That was crazy.
Sorry. I wonder if my computer is just tired. Let me quit this background process, and maybe things will go better.
No problem.
I apologize. I'm sorry.
No, you're good, bro. Listen, you're good. You've done a lot today.
All right, there's that. Let me try to switch back and see if this guy. It seems to be the camera. Gosh, anyway.
You're officially stronger than a computer. See that? Boom.
That's right.
You got more computational power than a computer. That's how Dr. Know-It-All knows it all. He really does.
So where were we again? Sorry, that totally threw me off.
No problem at all.
I was like that.
We're talking about full self-driving, 1 million users by the end of the year on beta. Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, right. And just to like circle around that, the 10.12 release, I think they're starting to treat this a little bit less as a beta and a little bit more as a kind of a wide release. And so they're really trying to work on the QA, the quality assurance, to make sure that this thing is really solid as they release it. So I think that's slowing the cadence down significantly. But I was saying, I think that what this indicates to me is, number one, of course, North America, the US and Canada, they're going to increase the number of people, because you've got to go from about 100,000 to 1 million. But also I have a pretty strong feeling that he's talking about including Europe with that as well. I mean, he has mentioned that before, but that it seems like that's where it needs to go. My personal opinion is that China needs to happen very, very quickly too, or else they're going to get lost there, because there's a lot of startups in China. But they also might be having significant problems with China in terms of the uh, there's like a data privacy issue, right? Because
Yeah.
China's like, no, you can't have this stuff going offshore and being housed in other data centers. So I don't, that's a whole other thing. But at the very least, it seems to me like Europe is going to be involved in that rollout to 1 million people. So it was a pretty big surprise. It wasn't that in the All In podcast, but it was pretty recently when he said 100,000 people. I think it was maybe the TED talk or something. He's been doing a
Yeah.
lot of interviews recently.
He has, yeah. And he's been in a really good mood in all of them, which I think
Yeah.
to me is like another sort of data point I think we can use that says, hey, things are going pretty well. You know, usually, especially even during this Twitter stuff, like he's still in a pretty good mood and he's very happy to talk about it in public, obviously, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I actually worried about that a little yesterday when he was doing that All In podcast. I was like, oh, he's saying an awful lot of stuff that I think might get him in trouble.
He's given like a sneak peek. Like I've had the luxury in my previous life before Tesla. I was at a pretty large company, and I was super fortunate to be. I worked very closely with the executives and sort of any of the investing partners, and I got to see a little bit of how the sausage is made with some of these dealings. And like I was watching it like wide eyed. I'm like, dude, like you're really like you don't care, bro. Like you're just like screw any NDA, screw any sort of like backdoor conversation that needs to happen in order to it's almost like an innovative, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it's almost like an innovative way to close a business deal is to just be very public about the hardships of the deal making process to as a leverage point to try and put pressure on the other party to either give you what you're looking for, or try to move the conversation towards a certain direction. Now, a lot of people would say that's freaking insane because like, where is like the humanity in this? Like, bro, like this is supposed to be a private dealing. Like, why are you showing everybody how the sausage is made? But maybe, if we go back to the sort of like how Elon thinks about business as a moral necessity in some way, maybe in his head is like, well, this is a necessary conversation that has to happen in public because it's going to move me closer to being able to achieve something for humanity that's going to be positive based on what I think is positive for humanity, right? So I'm trying to like frame this within how he would think about this. And I'm not excusing the behavior. I'm just trying to like study the almost like the human behavior of Elon in a way to be like, wow, man, like that's crazy.
It really honestly is pretty mind-blowing to get that much of an insight into the dealings. And what is that line? Information is power, right? And so he's removing the Twitter board. And my gosh, the CEO yesterday had that big old thread about how they can't determine the bots. And then Elon responded with a poop emoji. I mean,
he exposed himself, by the way, in that thread. I didn't mean to interrupt you. He exposed himself, and I can tell you exactly how. He did.
Oh, yeah, I think, there was some circular logic going on for sure.
Yeah.
But I think what Elon is doing is like, there's power in holding information. And what he's doing is he's removing that power. Because by just saying like, here, everybody know about, and just the fact that the CEO is actually engaging with him on Twitter means that Elon's already won.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he's talking about it publicly. It's in a weird way. There's a piece of me that feels like he's super naive, but there's another piece of me that's like, man, this guy's like the best business person ever.
Yeah.
Because he's working these angles and he's like, everybody find out. Here's what's going on. Here's how the sausage is made.
Exactly right. I think it's the latter. I really do think so because for somebody to be able to get the companies that he has to that level of success, you have to be good at business, man. Like you almost have to be cutthroat in some respects where you have to completely eliminate emotions and then use the levers that are at your disposal to make stuff happen. It's almost like he always talks about like what is the quickest path to the outcome you're looking for, and the more exposure and experience you have, the more levers you have at your disposal, and the more people are following you and watching everything you do, then the more you can leverage those things to make whatever you want happen. Back to that Parag Twitter thread. So there was a specific tweet that he had where he said that they catch about over 500,000 bots per day.
Yeah.
Per day, and they ban millions of accounts per week. Okay.
Right.
If you do some like simple math on that, that's about 71 on the lowest case scenario. If you take half a million daily and 2 million weekly, that's 71 million users essentially per quarter that are mitigated in some way. And that's if you compare that to Twitter's total user base, and this is not an apples to apples comparison, but just to give you kind of a sense of how big this thing is, Twitter's total user base is 230 million users. And so that's roughly a little over 30% of the user base every quarter is undergoing some sort of limiting of engagement with the platform at the lowest case scenario. So that 5% number, like even him releasing that data set, I'm like, okay, dude, like on any given quarter, if 500,000 is 2 million, and for some reason they become really good at bypassing your filters, then that number could be 50%. Who knows what that number could be? You know what I'm saying? So what really is that 5%? I think it's a very legitimate question, but the implications of Twitter having that number wrong for their ad model is disastrous.
Well, that's why they don't want to tell anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because I mean, Elon pointed that out because it's not a transactional advertising model on Twitter. It's a brand awareness model.
Right.
So, I mean, if, like, I guess probably like Instagram or something like that is more of a transactional thing. You get an ad and you click on it and they're like, hey, buy a new shirt or something, right? And you buy the shirt and therefore they can tell real person spent money, bought the shirt, good deal. But Twitter is much more like, hey, check out our brand. We're a cool brand. And they don't know if 50% of the users are bots, that means that they're just throwing money down the toilet. So yeah, it's huge. Absolutely.
It's crazy. Huge. What was something that you took away from, well, we talked about the Twitter stuff a little bit earlier, but what was another thing that you took away from that conversation that really stood out to you from the All In podcast?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I think that the morality thing was like a huge thing. The full self-driving, him talking about how Tesla is different because the full self-driving came up in the part where I can't remember who it was that asked him, but somebody said, you know, what are all the startups that Tesla is? And Elon was like,
Chamath,
you want me to
think.
talk for the next? Yeah, was it? Yeah, I think you're right. I think
pretty sure.
But you know, it was funny because Elon was like, oh, let me get started here. You know, he's like, but he didn't even get as far as he wanted to.
Right.
But you know, he was just talking about like where this startup and this startup and this startup and this startup and this startup, and it's all under the umbrella of Tesla, but it's just amazing. And part of that agile thing that I was talking with Joe about earlier today was sort of by default, when you're a tiny little, 2-3 person company, you're agile by default because he was saying that he was like, do you look in your bank account and see if you have money to buy this thing or do whatever you need? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, so you're agile. It's like, you literally are like, do we have the $50 to buy this piece of equipment? Yes. Okay, do it. But at some point as the company grows, when you get to 1,001 people, then you're an evil company, but you become less and less agile as you do that. And so I think that the startup mentality, the ability to maintain that agility that the startup has within Tesla, even though you've got 100,000+ employees now, is remarkable. And I mean, I don't know. You tell me about your experience. You're the one who actually worked there.
Yeah, I mean, it really is mind-blowing how small the company feels at 100,000 people. And that's been my biggest takeaway, is that the autonomy that everybody has, the capability of problem solving your own way, the capability of really moving across orgs in a way that I think is much different than any other corporation, especially of that size, is mind-blowing. It's almost like the best way to describe it, and I think I've said this in one of my videos, is like you're giving every single one of those 100,000 people the keys to run the company, and you're trusting them to do so, and you're enabling them to do so. Most corporations, if not every other corporation at that size, their primary incentive is to create processes and silos and sort of mechanisms to prevent people from messing up, because they they view the investment of time to fix people's mess ups as much larger than the benefits that they would get from allowing everybody to partake in creating solutions. Whereas Tesla is the opposite. Tesla's like, I'm willing to invest the time it takes to correct potential mistakes because I trust my entire workforce. I'm going to leverage my entire workforce to arrive to solutions. And yes, they will mess up. Yes, they will make errors. Yes, there'll be suboptimal solutions at points, but the cream of the crop will always shine. The best ideas will come forward, and those are going to be, multiple times better than whatever solution we had previously, especially in an environment where we ask people to not go dramatically outside of their bounds, right? So it's completely mind blowing, and I'm wondering at what point. I know this is something Joe has been talking about. Like, I wonder at what point do we get to a point where every company runs like Tesla in a way? Because if that was the case, I feel like humanity would have at least 10 times more things and value to consume or use or whatever, because it's such a groundbreaking way of making stuff happen. And I think the other part of it too is that it will also give people much better reason to go to work and much more fulfillment from the work because you're trusted in those environments. It's mind blowing. Yeah. It's completely mind blowing.
I do wonder if you talk about everybody else doing this. I wonder, and it would be an interesting experiment because Tesla, SpaceX, et cetera, have the pick of the litter. They have the best of the best people. And obviously, however HR hires people, they've got a really good idea of how these people are self-motivated and stuff. But there's a bell curve. So for every person who's like super motivated, super smart, there's somebody who's really not that motivated, just kind of. So it's like, how many companies could you form like this before you ran out of the people who are going to be willing to work in that circumstance? I don't know. Maybe people would kind of step up to it. Maybe what would happen is if you gave people the responsibility, they would step up and they'd be like, this is awesome. But I do worry that there would only be a certain percentage of the population that would be willing to do that.
That's a great point. And I think about that a lot because that's like, is the reason why Tesla has so much great talent, is that because they can get the best talent, or is that because they have the environment that allows that talent to come forward? Right. Like what is it really? I think it's a combination of both, but I think it's also a mission statement. I think mission statement is the big reason why Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and all these other companies have such a talent and capable workforce, is because it's not about the product. It's not about the money. I mean, it is, but
you got to live.
So, exactly. But it's priority number one is the mission. It's the mission. And to your point, how many missions are out there in the world that you can build a company around that's going to facilitate the maximum capability of the people that are working there, right? That's a great point. I don't know. I hope it's more than 20%. It's not going to be 100%, that's for sure. But right now it feels like it's 3%. It's like 3% of the companies are, maybe even less.
And as you were talking about this agility and the the giving people an amazing amount of responsibility, I think about my entire career, has been in academia at university, and that is the opposite. So I was trying to think. I think we have about 25,000 employees at the University of Georgia, and I'm not calling them out specifically. I just want to be very clear. Love my job. Go Dogs, right? National champions. But so there's that many employees so it's a quarter or less of the size, if you think about it as a company, of Tesla. And yet, in order to do anything, it takes forever. And the waterfall system of having a yearly fiscal budget, and you run out of money and that's it, and there's no way to change it in the middle. And now when we order computers, the computers have to be ordered. So we had to order them last month, so April, and they won't ship the computers until the next April. And we're not allowed to update the computers we ordered. So we're essentially always buying 12-month out of date computers, just and I'll go one step further. And that is that the university is very large in terms of its geographical footprint. And the parking system is, we have to park in only one parking lot. So if I want to collaborate with another faculty member, like who's a mile away, that means I have to commit to walking there or taking the bus or it's yeah, exactly right. It's just like, what in the world? So it's the most siloed, just physically siloed place. You can't go and collaborate with other people. Honestly, the pandemic has been one of the best things that's happened because everybody's gotten used to Zoom meetings now. And so at the very least, I can have conversations with other faculty that are on the other side of campus. But again, I'm not calling out UGA.
Yeah.
Really good school. Every other school that I've ever worked at, except for the tiny little California Lutheran University, which is in Thousand Oaks. But that was because it was tiny. It was a super small little university. And so it was very easy to walk across campus, to talk to people in completely other departments. So it's not just something about size, because clearly Tesla can do it. But there's just all these layers of archaeological layers of crap that get layered on top. And everyone's afraid of making a mistake. I mean, oh my gosh, when you try to submit something, I want to get a reimbursement for, buying something. And they're like, oh, whoa, did you buy this correctly? It's like, it's like,
yeah, that's kind of like, do you think that's a academia thing, period? Is there a way, like, do you see a path for sort of academia to not be like that? Like, is it a sustainable thing where you give more, like, you just trust your faculty members to do the right thing, and you trust everybody to do the right thing? Yeah.
If Elon Musk happens to be paying attention to this, he wants to start this Texas Institute of Technology and Science.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm like, let's talk agile education. I think education is an industry that is incredibly ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
So you heard it here. I haven't even talked about this on my channel yet. So,
so what do you think that is? What do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I have ideas, but they're relative. We need to start with a whiteboard and just start writing down stuff. But it's basically what you're talking about. It's giving I don't know. I mean, think about it right now. There's faculty. So there's a class system. Right, there's faculty, super cool, and there's like levels of faculty between assistant professor, and so it's very hierarchical. And then there's staff, and then there's facilities, and there's this huge sort of pyramid. So there's this class structure that's built into universities, and I think it's nice as a faculty member. It's like, I'm at the top of the pile. But I think that's one thing, like just what you're saying, like we can do stuff where the person who's I was talking with Joe about this, but he was saying like the people who are building batteries, when they build the building, they can go out and actually put I-beams up and like weld them into place. It's like, learn how to do this thing. So one of the things I could think about would be flattening the whole structure out. So it's like, forget about this thing where you've got this class system, and have an ability to learn from anybody. If you want to go out and learn how to do plantings from one of the groundskeepers, why couldn't that count as education? That's fantastic knowledge to know. Believe me, my backyard looks like garbage. I wish I had that knowledge, You
and I both.
Yeah. So I think one of the things could be sort of flattening it, but also then making it more agile. Like this semester and year concept is incredibly ancient, and it has served things. And even beyond that, just the basics. Oh gosh, I'm really getting into this. I'm going to get fired.
No, you're not. Come on, bro.
But
you're educating. You're educating.
Are ancient, like British medieval education, where it's like you go into a classroom, everybody writes down the same thing at the same time. You take a test to regurgitate that information back again, and that tells you whether you did well or not. That is not the way the modern world works at all, and it doesn't work on semester systems. If a class needs to take 3 weeks to get done, that's great. If a class needs to take 2.5 years to get done, that's great. Like it needs to have more flexibility built in. I'm constantly bumping up against the semester system.
Yeah.
I'm like, boy, I'd really like to be able to do a large scale project with the students, but then there's all of these things you have to go through, and which faculty member gets the credit for the class, and
yeah.
So we just got to scrap all of that stuff and start with first principles. Just like, what is education? What do we need out of it in a modern world? And how can we best serve the people?
Yeah, I love that. Like I was literally talking with my wife this morning about this. Like, why I feel like education period at any level needs to be revamped heavily, because in the age of the internet, you have knowledge, like you have information readily available. And one of the things that I think schools were valuable for before the age of the internet was exposing you to that information, because that stuff was usually in a library or in a book somewhere that was indexed, but like you wouldn't even know how to find that information. You would have to get it with an expert to teach you that information. Now that information is literally a Google search away. Okay.
Right.
And so why have we been so slow to transition to a sort of system where the school's primary function is to teach you how to think and to teach you how to look up the information and to give you the base sort of fundamentals to understand the universe, mathematics, physics, maybe economics, right? Like financial education is something that I feel like we're missing tremendously in the school system, which is like core to the experience of being a human in the system that we live in. So why do you think it's taking so long? Like, what's the deal? What's going on?
I think there's
sorry for these big questions.
One is mental laziness. Again, if it works, it's just easier to roll with it, right? But then the other thing, and bureaucracy is really good at preserving bureaucracy. Like if you look at the federal government or a state government or any large body, I'm absolutely convinced that any meeting that has more than about 5 or 6 people in it is useless. Like it should be scrapped. Because you can't function. Otherwise, it's just an informational thing, and you might as well send an email.
It's just a show at that point.
Yeah, it's just a show, right? You know, you do PowerPoint, and everybody goes like, "Nice job." When you get 3 or 4 people together, you can actually accomplish something. So anyway, but the levels of bureaucracy that are involved, just dude, it's like you're trying to push an aircraft carrier. You know, you're just like, ugh. So it takes a lot of people to push that thing and get it started moving. So I think that's there. And then, of course, there's the monetary aspect. It's like a lot of people make good livings all the way up and down the chain, and not great livings because it's education, but you know, so they get allocated from the state. The state gives them money. People are happy because they get money. They get paid. They get to have a life. So there's just an awful lot of things in the way. So I think it needs someone like Elon Musk who has philanthropy in mind and has a ridiculous amount of money, because education is incredibly expensive. It's very people heavy. Like when you look at the budget for a department or a university, like 90% of that budget is humans. So it's really, really expensive to do education, at least the way that we do it now. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just, there's just an awful lot of stuff in the way. Now, I want to take a step back. You know, when you talk about learning everything you want from the internet, and I think that's great, and autodidacticism, which is like teaching yourself, is super important. But the place where educators really need to be there is not for fact-based things and stuff like that, but to expose people to new ideas and say, yeah, that's really cool. That is one way of looking at this, but we better look at it this way and this way and this way, and to make people uncomfortable. And the saddest thing that I've seen in education that's happened over the last 30 years is the fact that students will say, oh, I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm triggered. I can't talk about that. And I'm like, no, this is the place where you have to do that.
Right.
Like, it's like, you damn well better do it here, because where else are you going to do it? This is the purpose. Like the whole point of education is to make you think. You were talking about that.
Yeah.
You're like, you can learn facts anywhere, but the point of education is to like make you think. And if you're not exposed to things that you don't already know, how do you ever think about it? Like a foreign language. Like if you only ever spoke English in your whole life and never were exposed to any other foreign, there's like all the ways of thinking about it that you imagine, and interacting with people in their native language, and a humbleness because you realize you suck at this language, So there's like all of these things accrue from learning something like that. But it's painful. It's hard, right? It sucks to learn.
Do you think? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's good. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you think there's room for AI to transform the classroom and be a lot less human reliant?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess it's probably, again, just because I've been thinking about this stuff a lot recently, but in my mind, a digital self-management is actually an excellent model for education. And that is, I think about like a nursery school, like those kids are great. They're kind of self-organized. It's like one kid will be like, oh, I want to paint a picture. And like 5 of them will like gang up and they'll start painting a picture or something, right? That needs to happen at all levels, all the way through. And, not painting a picture necessarily, but something else. It could be like, here's Fermat's last theorem. What the hell?
Right.
How do you solve that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's go
do a
try
Laplace
to
transform or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like all of these crazy things that can go all the way from totally rudimentary skills all the way up to really, really complicated mathematical, philosophical, whatever things, but give people the power to learn what they want to learn. I think that's the big thing. And then have the where AI comes in is the ability, I hesitate to say grade, but to give them feedback and to say like, oh, you're going in the right direction. Or, I mean, at some point there's a right answer to a lot of these things. So the AI has a relatively simple job of like warm or cold, or kind of like that game. And then eventually, of course, it gets to really complicated stuff where there is no necessary right answer. And still the AI can come in and give you feedback about what it thinks, but then a human teacher can also intervene as well. And that's where domain expertise comes in.
Got it. That's fascinating. There's something you said in there that I really want to like touch on. Like, so you said, it can enable people to AI can enable people to learn what they want to learn, what they feel like it's most interesting to them, and potentially would be the thing that they could be best at to maximize their true potential. So as an educator, like what percentage of the population do you think is in that bucket truly? Like if you were to take 100 people, how many people that are in the school system do you actually think are studying something that's going to allow them to reach their true potential versus learning something because they feel like they have to, or because they've been told to do so? Because my gut, I went to school because I felt like I had to. Like I gave myself as an example, and I'm like constantly wondering that question. Like I don't know if you have a gut feel or something. This is like,
well, what did you like? So what did you major in, and what did you feel about that? Like did you graduate? Like
I did, yeah. I went to Penn State, and I studied. I had my bachelor of science in mathematics and a minor in statistics. So that's what I studied in school. But my GPA was dog shit. Sorry, it was not good. And the reason why is because at the time I did a 2.7, dude. Like I'm like the worst student on earth. I may have studied 10 hours in my college career. And thank God that I graduated with 2.7 because, what the hell. But should have been a 0. But like for me, and I started as an aerospace engineer. So I went to school as an aerospace engineer. That was my initial major. And then I decided to switch over to mathematics in my 3rd year because I'm like, wow, aerospace is like, I just can't. Like my brain doesn't play nice with this stuff. I know how to do math really well. So let me go over to math. And then math started getting crazy abstract in the 3rd year. I'm like, holy crap, I'm not good at this either. And then I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna stick with it because I don't want people to think I'm a loser, that I'm some guy that keeps changing majors, right? So I forced myself through it, but I hated every second of it, to be completely honest. I really hated every second of it.
Here's a really weird point of connection between us. So I went to Princeton. I got there as an electrical engineer, switched to physics because what I really wanted to be was a computer science major, but they didn't have it back when I was going there. It was ancient. I hated every minute of it. I was in classes with people who were just way too freaking smart. Like I was just a dumbass trying to like cling on. So my GPA was like 3 or something like that, Dude,
I literally had a teacher come up to me and he was like, yeah, some people just have it and some don't. And it doesn't seem like you don't. I'm like, it seems like you don't. I'm like, what the hell, bro? Like, how am I supposed to go home and what am I supposed to do? Change my major? Like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like that memory is
exactly
like burned in my mind.
Yeah, they would just come up to me and they'd be like, what are you doing here? You need to just like go do something else. And I was like, oh, I'm trying. So, but the really, really bizarre thing, the reason why we're doing this conversation today instead of tomorrow, because you wanted to do tomorrow, is because I'm leaving for my reunions, because Princeton has these massive reunions.
Nice.
And it's 35 years, which is terrifying how
long
I've been in college. But anyway, the worst, I tell people there's 2 worst days in my life. The number 2 worst day, there was a number 1, I won't talk about that. But the number 2 worst day of my life was my graduation from college, because I was like, I've wasted 4 years of college. Everyone's like, I had the best experience in college. I was like, all I did was study. I didn't do anything but study, and I failed at it. And it was just miserable. But on the other hand, I now have a physics degree from Princeton.
Yeah.
And the failure, all of that pain and everything taught me so much, not just about what I was learning, but about how to learn, about it was still valuable. Like what you're saying is like, yeah, people tell you suck and you're like, well, I'm just going to keep going. There's something to say, like computer programming, which is like one of my favorite and least favorite things to do ever, is like, it's just literally banging your head against the wall until a piece falls out and you're like, oh, that's what I should do. So,
Yeah. Interesting.
But it's just, it's a weird little point of connection between the two of us. That's
for sure. Yeah. I remember almost never going to class. Like there were a few classes where I would go the first day. I'd be like, oh man, like I just really don't. I would go to second day and I'm like, I hate this. I just hate this. So I would show up for the tests and I would try to cram the night before, spend an hour or something. And then to try and get a C. Because I just was not interested in it I just wasn't. I think that's, to your point, I think that was a great learning lesson for me because it really taught me how I don't like to learn. And I think that was a very the older I get, the more I realize how powerful that lesson was, because it's almost like it teaches you like, hey, like, like you really should, if you're going to do something, do it because you want to. Don't do it because you feel like you have to, or you feel like, whatever, you're being forced to do so, And
so here's education failing. Two people here, because, I worked like a dog and felt like a failure. You couldn't get interested and latch on to things.
Yeah.
And so you felt like a failure. That's the failure of education, because it needs to be, and I know people are like, oh, stop it with this thing. Everyone's like, oh, everyone has a different intelligence. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm like, if you're interested in something, you're going to learn it. And if people had just said, here is this cool information about physics or math or whatever it is. And I remember taking imaginary math. That was the last math class I ever took, because I was like, I can't even like wrap my head around this stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, but if it was just like, here's information and here's something like an AI or a person or whatever that's just saying like, yeah, that was good. That was a good thing that you did, like a micro little moment there, which is why your AI would be fantastic. And then you're like, you kind of educate yourself and you're like, you go at the speed you need to and you learn what you need to, instead of like, this is the amount of stuff that this is the hill we have to climb this semester. And I do this too. It's like, okay, project 1, project 2, project 3, project 4, and that's what the hill you have to climb this semester. And if you don't get all the steps, then you get a bad grade.
Yeah.
And it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe when I think back to it, sometimes I'm like, maybe I should have put more effort to find the right thing for me. But it's like, I feel like at the same time, like, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like there has to be a way to come up with a system that can tap into the maximum potential of a person as early as humanly possible, and then put them on a train, basically a fast track to success, essentially.
Right.
Like, hey, listen, like, dude, like, just follow this path, you're good. But I don't know how unrealistic that is, because maybe humans, maybe our interests and things change over time. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we have a thing where maybe at year 12, when we're 12 years old, we're on path to be a great musician. But then year 16, when we're 16 years old, we are, super interested in rocketry and electric vehicles. And like, those are two very divergent paths. You know what I'm saying? So that's always very interesting to watch.
That's true, but I think the ultimate really good education would be to be able to do both of those. And what I mean is something to figure out how to, just again, to use myself as an example, got a physics degree, said, screw this, I want to do English. And so I got a freaking PhD in English. Had a much better time. That was awesome. I was like, this is great. And then I went to school again more recently and got a master's in artificial intelligence. And so it's like, and yeah, all those things.
Oh, that's all you've done?
but what I'm saying is they can all fit together, and it doesn't have to be formal education either. But if you want to be a musician and you have interest in rocketry, well, what the hell? Maybe
do them.
The way that sound works off of rockets and things like that, you can engineer things to, I'm just spitballing.
Yeah.
Or just compose freaking music out of rocketry. Like maybe the way the rocket like jiggles or something as it takes off creates a really cool harmonic vibration. And so you're like creating music from rocket, launches. So
yeah, I mean, how is that any different than like, how Ferrari like tunes their exhausts to have like, to be harmonics? Like why could like 20 years down the road, when we have a souped up starship with like sick harmonics coming, it sounds like a Ferrari going to the freaking Mars,
It's got racing stripes painted down the side.
Dude.
It's like,
put some rims, just put rims on the side. Just
we got spinners.
Hell yeah, dude.
Let me awesome.
Let me ask you this, because you are a musical person, and your son is also a musical person, and I love music, and I play guitar and played clarinet and played piano. Like I've been very fortunate being exposed to that. Do you think, I always intuitively thought that music helps me think and problem solve better somehow. I don't know how, but like my gut tells me that having been exposed to music and that being part of who I am has helped me in other parts of life that I can't describe how, but I feel like it has. I don't know if it's like it's a difficult thing sometimes. So you got to sit down and just freaking figure out how to play this riff, or figure out how to solo over a certain thing, and kind of get some music theory in your brain to understand the pentatonic scale and all that stuff, right? So, how do you think about that at all? Do you think there is a role for more music education?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And this is one of the, again, it's that sort of class-based system. It's like STEM at the top, this other stuff at the bottom. And it's like, why? I would contend that a lot of people who are trained in music or art or something could contribute very, very highly to society, and not just by painting paintings and stuff, but by being in a company like SpaceX or Tesla. There are roles for people who are like that. But geez. So I think that I find music to be something that, again, is both hard and incredibly pleasurable, right? Because it's like, it just turned out like I did a lot of instruments and I wasn't particularly good, but I was always a really good singer. And so I've been singing since I was just a little kid, in fairly, formal situations. And now I sing in the UGA choir, which is really, really nice. You can't tell right now because I've been talking all day and my voice is hoarse. But
I was going to ask you before we end, maybe sing us a song.
No, not today. I've also learned that I'm not a soloist.
Okay, gotcha.
Good in a choir. I'm like, it's like the difference between a violinist who is really good at like the solo stuff and somebody who deserves to be in a section with like 8 or 10 other violinists.
Yeah. It's like a virtuoso versus like a second violinist. Yeah,
I'm really good in the chorus.
Yeah.
So that's where I should be.
Gotcha.
But anyway, it's pretty amazing stuff. We were circling back on, you were talking about music
education. Yeah, if it has a role, and if it's something that somehow either passively or directly helps you with other parts of your life, like for example, problem solving, things like that. Yeah.
So first of all, I'm a huge, I love to listen to music when I'm working. So oftentimes, for me at least, it's like classical music or something that doesn't have a lot of vocals in English, because that does get distracting for me. But I know a lot of other people like music with words that they listen to. So I think that goes to having attention deficit disorder. And somebody described it the best way I heard about it is like you have a gigantic information pipe that's always taking stuff in. And the music for me fills up part of that pipe. And so it allows me to focus easier on the thing that I want. But I think beyond that, we're creatures, like we're physical creatures, and playing music is a physical activity. Like whatever it is, whether playing guitar, singing, playing the piano, it's very, very physical. I mean, you can get winded by the time you're done. You're like, holy crap, I was jamming on that thing. And so there's a real limbic pleasure. Our limbic systems get a huge amount of pleasure out of that. And so I would hesitate, even if you love to code or something like that, I think that most people probably do something else besides code all day, because there's just, your body and your soul need other things. So so I think music fulfills that. And it can be a career, of course, too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I find so much pleasure in music personally, and like the physical nature of it is a I've never thought about that before, but it makes so much sense. Like I play my guitar on my live streams at the end just to kind of thank
Right.
all the people for coming on. I'm
Yeah.
sweating by the end of it. I'm legitimately
Yeah.
sweating, and I feel good. I got endorphins running through my freaking. I mean, I feel great. I feel
Yeah.
so good, and the type of music I love is metal, so it's like physical. I gotta put my wrist into it. You know what I'm saying? Like I
Yeah.
gotta make
Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
sounds come out. So
They
it's
have the left hand too. So yeah.
hell yeah, man! It's a great thing. It's a beautiful thing. Listen, I know you've had a very full schedule, so I definitely don't want us to go too long. And I know your voice is also like I know I got a full day ahead of you tomorrow as well. So, but I definitely want to have you back for more because I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
these conversations are great. And I would love to invite you back at some point as well. Whenever you want, you're always welcome. There is definitely a
And we can flip
question.
it, of course, too. You're
I
welcome to
would
come
love
on
that.
mine. So
I
yeah.
would love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah. But let me ask you one last question before we wrap
Sure.
up, because
Sure.
I really do value your insight. I think I would love to pick your brain more on the education stuff too in a future date because I
Right.
really have a lot of thoughts about that, and the fact that you are part of that is
Right.
fascinating to me, and I just really want to learn more about that. But this is just a philosophical question that I tend
Sure.
to sometimes finish my podcast with. But what do you think is humanity's purpose?
I guess this will reveal a lot of how I think about things, but I think our purpose is to make what we want to out of it, out of ourselves. I think that I'm not a person who believes that we have a priori purpose. I guess that would be, and I'll make my parents very unhappy by saying that. But I think that it's important that we create our own meaning. Like again, it's like, what do you want out of life? We'll chase that. I have four boys, so
Well,
it's been a thing, man. But but for all of them, it's like what, like the musician, like it's like he struggled in school always, and I felt so bad for him. I was like, oh gosh, I wish we had a better education system. One of the wake up moments, right? To realize when you see your child struggling and like realize how the education system is failing him. But it's like, what is it that what are you passionate about? What is the thing? You were talking about that with education. You're like, if you change paths, but like, what is it that you want? And sure, at the moment it might be to go to sleep or something like that, but what is it, the thing that's like a through line? And so this one son, he's like, I love music, I love to do this stuff. It's like, okay, how can I support you? How can you add value to the world by doing this? And again, it's not like you have to make a widget or something like that. There's so many ways of adding value to the world, but I guess that would be the meaning of life, is to add more than you take. To
I
give
love
more
it.
than you take would be a good life to live.
I love it. That's amazing. Yeah, and the fact, four boys, bro. Dang.
I know.
My God. What was that
27 to
household like?
27 to 14. It's
Oh
a big range.
man, dude, that's crazy. No, that's beautiful. I mean, I think I always find the answer very interesting, especially from like people that have kids, like parents. I feel like there's always like the child variable is also there, which I think gives a lot of complexity to the answer as well. And it's
Right.
always fascinating comparing that with folks that don't have children. Like my wife and I don't have children, and I think about life in a specific way, what it means to serve a purpose. But like, I think your answer is super fascinating, and one that I think a lot of us could definitely learn from, because if we're all able to bring value to life for
Right.
ourselves and each other, like how is that not a better world for all of us? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, how is that not
I
a
mean,
better
that's
world
the
for all
thing.
of
It's
us?
like you should leave the world a better place than you found it, I guess.
Yeah, I love it.
It's a basic idea when you go hiking in the woods. Don't
Yeah.
like just leave your crap everywhere.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
And try to be a good steward.
Actually, one last thing. So, do you go to the UGA games at all? Like, do you check out the
Oh, yeah.
football games? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
How do you think they're going to be this year? Because it's the quarterback's coming back, or he's a sophomore, right? Or no, he's a junior.
Oh gosh, there were two.
forget.
So I'm trying to remember. One graduated.
Yeah, because the one was a walk-on, right? He's the
Yeah,
one who
yeah.
won the championship, and like they
Right.
had him starting. My one buddy, his name's Keith, and he just moved back to Georgia. They live about like 40 minutes north of Atlanta, and
Oh, cool.
he's a big Dogs fan, and I remember I was texting with him when they were playing the national championship, and like the first half, he was so upset because it's here we go again. Like here we go again. It doesn't matter, you know. We'll lose to freaking Bama in the SEC championship, and it's again like who cares? Like this is what happens every year. And then the second half, he was losing his mind because the team like did a 180 and it just came out firing on all cylinders, and they were finally able to score some points. The Georgia curse.
It was great. I had the exact same emotional. It was especially after the SEC game and having lost that one too. I was like, but it was due. I have a feeling. I'll tell you my gut. I have no information for this because I don't follow the team closely enough to know.
Okay.
I feel like it's going to be a little bit of a building year because they lost an awful lot of like standouts to graduation. So, you know, I'm not expecting them to win national championship again. I certainly expect them to make a bowl game, but maybe like 8-3, 9-2. I'm probably going to get. Sorry for all the fans. Please don't hurt me.
I mean, I think if there's anything that Georgia, I think does really well is that they have elite talent coming in every year. You know, like if there's they're one of those teams that like they not so much rebuild, they reload, but it's more like a experience thing for them. But the fact,
I mean, it's amazing. Like the recruiting is incredible for you.
Yeah. Killer. And the SEC is like the toughest freaking football championship. Yeah, I'm hoping we can play you guys in one of these bowls. I went to Penn State. I follow Penn State football very closely, so it's like
there you go.
You know, I follow the recruits and I see who goes out to the NFL, and I
did graduate school at Ohio State, so you know.
Ooh, okay. I like Ohio State.
No, sorry.
I like him better than Michigan.
I have a really good friend who's a Michigan grad, and he's always like,
yeah, I think Tom Nash, I've had him on my channel a couple of times. I think he went to Michigan, and I haven't made any comments about him going to Michigan, but I think next time I talk to him, I'm going to give him some shit.
If I ever talk to Tom, I'll have to make sure I don't mention Ohio State.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise he'll crawl through the screen and grab
just
me.
say that school up north, bro. That school up north. Listen, John, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on. Blast talking to you, man. Like I said, welcome back anytime. I would love to continue digging deeper in the education stuff and obviously the AI stuff as well. But yeah, man, thank you so much. Safe travels out to Princeton. Enjoy your week and your weekend. And man, great talking to you, and hopefully we'll speak soon again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.